Welcome back. We start a news bulletin from the US, which says it has killed the deputy leader of Al-Qaeda, Qasim al-Raymi, in a counter-terrorism operation in Yemen. In a White House statement, President Donald Trump said the killing further degrades the movement. Trump's statement says al-Raymi was the leader of Al-Qaeda's Yemen branch and a deputy to its leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri. He said, under al-Raymi, the group committed unconscionable violence against civilians in Yemen. The president said the US and its allies are safer after this killing. He said this Pentagon will continue to track down and eliminate terrorists who want to harm the US. Moving on to the Middle East, in Syria, the government says it has regained control of the strategic town of SYRIAN in rebel-held Idlib province. State media says forces have begun dismantling explosives set by militants in the city. The advance marks the latest gains in a major Russian-led campaign that began in December. In the meantime, Turkey has refused to change the border of its de-escalation zone other than the framed by the Astana and Sochi agreements. Speaking to a briefing, Turkey's presidential spokesperson Ibrahim Kalin said Ankara will not accept other proposals for the de-escalation zone. In a related development, Turkish and Russian delegations will meet tomorrow in Ankara to discuss the escalating situation in Syria's Idlib province. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said the talks aim to stop Syrian government aggression and accelerate the political process. He said Ankara will do whatever is necessary to stop a humanitarian tragedy in Idlib. The remarks come after Syrian forces claim to regain control of the strategic town of Sarakeb. Tensions in the region spiked after clashes between Turkish and Moscow-backed Syrian forces in Idlib. Ankara's forces discontinued joint patrol with Russian troops after accusing Moscow of not fulfilling the promise. U.S. presidential advisor Jared Kushner has briefed the UN Security Council on President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan. Kushner blamed Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas for a recent spike in violence, which has killed 4 civilians. Jared Kushner met with ambassadors from the 15-nation council for a private hour-long conversation at the U.S. mission. Speaking to media, Security Council President Mark Bechstein refused to give details about said, and it was a good exchange of views and questions on the plan. President Abbas is scheduled to brief the UN Council over Palestine's reservations surrounding the plan on February 11th. The death toll from the new coronavirus has jumped to 636, with over 31,000 people infected in China. The country's National Health Commission says 73 people have died from the disease in the past 24 hours. More in this report.
With no signs of the new coronavirus outbreak abating, the disease is claiming dozens of lives each day. China's President Xi Jinping says Beijing is doing everything it can to contain the virus. Beijing has pumped in billions of dollars into its economy to cushion it from disruption caused by the disease. The People's Bank of China says the outbreak could disturb economic activity, but it will soon return to normal.
We think that the epidemic situation may cause disturbance to China's economic activity in the first quarter, but after the epidemic is brought under control, the economy will return quickly to potential output.
The World Health Organization is planning a research and innovation forum in Geneva on February 11th to study the virus. In Japan, another 41 people quarantined on a cruise liner have tested positive for the coronavirus, bringing the total cases to 61.
The remaining result of 171 people were found out and 41 people tested positive for the new coronavirus. We are now preparing to transport these to medical facilities in Tokyo and other prefectures.
In the meantime, the Chinese doctor who first warned of the coronavirus has died from the disease. Li Wenyang was one of a group of whistleblowers who passed on information to his friends about the outbreak in December last year.
In India, the government has charged Umar Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti under the controversial Public Safety Act. The order against the former chief ministers of occupied Kashmir came on the last day of their 6-month detention without charges. Hundreds of Kashmiri politicians are in detention since August 5th after rejecting India's illegal annexation of the valley. 2 more Kashmiri leaders, Ali Muhammad Sagar and Sartaj Madhvi, have also been booked. Under this act, politicians can remain arrested for up to 2 years without trial. The valley is reeling under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 187 days. Inspired from an all-women sit-in at Delhi's Shaheen Bagh, similar protests have spread across India against the controversial Citizenship Act. Civil activists, students, and politicians are holding demonstrations against the law for the last 2 months. The latest women's sit-in is being held at Deoband town of northern Uttar Pradesh state. Starting with only 4, the demonstration has gathered over 1,000 women in just 11 days. Similarly, women in Lucknow, Mumbai, and Kolkata refuse to end protests till the law is withdrawn. In exchange for Babri Mosque, the Indian government has given Muslims land 25 kilometers away from Ayodhya. On November 9th last year, the Indian Supreme Court handed over Babri Mosque to Hindus in a controversial decision. The handed over land is currently government agricultural field and located near Dhanipur village in Uttar Pradesh state. Expressing unhappiness, Ayodhya Muslims say there is no point in giving the land so far away from the original site. Hindu fanatics destroyed Babri Mosque in Ayodhya, Uttar Pradesh in 1992, starting riots which claimed 2,000, mostly Muslim lives. In Ireland, voters go to the polls tomorrow to decide who should lead the government in Dublin. It will be the country's first general election since February 2016. Under Ireland's electoral system, voters choose a group of lawmakers to represent their area in Parliament. Voters can specify their second and third choices to allow votes to be transferred to remaining candidates until vacant seats are filled. On February 4th, leaders of Ireland's 3 largest parties clashed in a final TV debate. Fine Gael leader Leo Varadkar said it was a change election, warning voters not to back Fianna Fáil or Sinn Féin. The leaders of both parties rejected Varadkar's criticism. Poland has adopted and enforced a controversial law restricting judicial independence in the country. President Andrzej Duda approved the new legislation despite criticism from the EU and Council of Europe. Poland's governing Law and Justice Party passed the bill in the lower house, which had already been rejected by the Senate in December. The country's judges now face fines, demotion, and even the sack for questioning the government's divisive judicial reforms. The new law also stops judges from being politically active and requires them to declare their affiliation with civil organizations. The Polish opposition has warned the country's civil liberties are now being eroded. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has called for a peace deal to end the dispute with Russia over the South Kuril Islands. Speaking at a rally in Tokyo, Abe said Japan will push for negotiations one step at a time to find an acceptable solution. Abe said both nations must reach an understanding and build relations of mutual trust and friendship. He said it is important to further develop joint Russian-Japanese economic projects on the disputed islands. Japan and Russia's dispute over the sovereignty of the 4 Kuril Islands dates back to the end of World War II. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has criticized U.S. foreign policy of regime change in Venezuela. Speaking in Mexico, Lavrov said Washington is trying to create a pretext for military intervention. Russia and the United States have repeatedly clashed over Venezuela, where oil companies and military continue to support President Nicolas Maduro. Lavrov extended Russia's support for Maduro, saying Washington's attempts to remove him were useless and counterproductive.
Our Western partners also think dialogue is necessary, but with the objective of addressing the criteria for regime change. And I think that is not mediation, but rather an imposition of foreign models. We hear statements from Washington that there are no options but presidential change.
After 3 days of confusion and controversy, former Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg holds a slim lead over U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders in the Iowa caucus. Iowa Democratic Party Chairman Troy Price apologized for the delay, blaming technical glitches in the result reporting app for the debacle. More in this report.
Senator Elizabeth Warren was third with 18%, while frontrunner and former Vice President Joe Biden was trailing in fourth place on 15.8%. Sanders won the popular vote by a margin of 6,000, but was virtually tied on 26% with Buttigieg in the tally for the state's 41 delegates. Only a fraction of a percent separates the left and moderate presidential hopefuls, with both candidates taking 11 delegates.
I'm confident that we're going to do really well here in New Hampshire, having won Iowa. We're going to do very well in Nevada. I think we're going to do a lot better than people think in South Carolina. I think we've got a good shot to win California. And bottom line, I believe that we are well positioned to win the Democratic nomination and to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
Meanwhile, Buttigieg said his campaign's strong showing was a validation of his candidacy's vision for America.
It has been an extraordinary week, and we are absolutely electrified by the energy that we are coming here with and by the extraordinary validation of this campaign's vision that we had in Iowa on Monday.
Iowa Democrats have rejected Democratic National Committee Chair Tom Perez's call for a recanvassing of the caucus. Democratic candidates have already hit the campaign trail for Tuesday's New Hampshire primary.
We're taking a short break, but coming up next in the news bulletin is South African surfers stop using polyethylene surfboard. Woods Hospice uses pet therapy for patients. Welcome back to your news bulletin. In Nigeria, the death toll from a Lassa fever outbreak has risen to 47. The country's Center for Disease Control, the NCDC, says there have been 365 confirmed cases of acute viral hemorrhagic fever. Last week, the NCDC reported 41 deaths in 19 of the country's 36 states since the year beginning. But it said 23 states have now been affected by the outbreak. Lassa fever is a viral hemorrhagic fever belonging to the same family as the Ebola and Marburg viruses. The disease is endemic to Nigeria, and its name comes from the town of Lassa in the north, where it was first identified in 1969. Greece has detected its first case of African swine fever in a pig on a domestic breeding farm in the northern region of Syros. At a news conference, Agriculture Minister Makis Voridis said measures are being taken to contain the disease. He said pigs within a 3-kilometer radius of the farm have been culled. The minister said trading pork from Syros has also been banned. African swine fever has spread to Eastern Europe in recent years. The pace at which it has spread has alarmed governments and pig farmers. In Turkey, the death toll from an avalanche in the eastern province of Van has risen to 41. Officials said 84 people have been injured after 2 avalanches hit the mountainside near Turkey's eastern border with Iran. The avalanches took place on Tuesday and Wednesday near the Van-Bahri highway in Van. A team of 180 search and rescue workers has since been sent to the scene along with medical units and ambulances. Family members of dead rescuers mourned their losses at a military ceremony, while their loved ones' remains were set to be flown home for funerals. Interior Ministry Solimon Soylu and Health Minister Feratin Koka were among the officials attending the ceremony. In South Africa, sea surfers are attempting for greener skies at the rugged Cape Peninsula. They are switching to handcrafted wooden surfboards, dropping polyethylene boards. This report describes what surfers are doing to make their sport environmental friendly.
As dawn breaks over Muizenberg, Cape Town, the conditions are just right for a morning surf. Matthew looks like any other surfer, but with a twist. His surfboard is made from wood.
For me, it reinvigorated my love for surfing because it's a whole new feel. It paddles differently, it rides differently. Yeah, you know, surfing's all about the feel.
Patrick handcrafts each board, and most are made from sustainably sourced Japanese cedar wood, found on South Africa's east coast. They're hollowed out to make them lighter, a technique that was abandoned in the early 1950s for newer, more competitive boards. For Patrick, these beautiful boards are all about the design.
Wood is a unique material and we need to design for that. And so the board shapes that I've chosen, I think, are matched towards wood. And so those shapes go really, really well. You know, I wouldn't take a performance shortboard and make it in wood and expect it to be a success.
Patrick has made 850 of these boards over the last decade, not one exactly the same as the other. It's a drop in the ocean if you look at the large-scale production of modern boards, but for surfers like him, this board truly is one of a kind.
In Poland, a children's hospice is trying to bring joy to its residents' shortened lives with the help of a very special puppy. Doctors in Woods are using pet therapy to provide comfort and companionship to terminally ill patients. Watch this report for more.
2-month-old French bulldog Havana has begun a career as a therapy dog at a hospital for critically ill children. It was brought in mainly for Zuzia, a deaf and blind girl, and a boy named Ignacy, who suffers from Menkes syndrome. The little companion soon became a source of joy and excitement for the other patients.
Most of the children who live in the hospice home are children who cannot communicate verbally, so we communicate with them through touch. Havana performs really well here because Ignace relaxes when Havana is sleeping by his feet. They can sleep together for many hours.
The idea of adding a puppy to the staff came from Natalia Pasiachnek, head of the hospice, who also specializes in dog therapy. Every resident at the hospice went through an allergy test before doctors gave the go-ahead to the idea.
I was with my Boston Terrier at a therapy dog training, and there was a woman there who had a French bulldog who was, in fact, peaceful and well-adjusted. And I think these types of dogs perform well in dog therapy as dog therapists, especially with children who are sick and not in direct contact with others.
Like every other staff member, Havana will be fully trained, this time to become a fully certified therapy dog once she reaches the age of 1. For now, she spends most of her time sleeping and playing with the patients.
Asian markets are trading lower following 3 sessions of broad gains as investors await the release of China's January trade numbers. The rising debt toll by the new coronavirus and its consequent economic damage put a lid on the week's sharp rally. Mainland Chinese shares traded lower, with Shanghai and Shenzhen composite shedding over 0.5%. Japan's Nikkei 225 registered marginal losses, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng dipped almost 1%. South Korea's Kospi has shed over 1%. Oil prices are up 0.22%, extending gains from yesterday. The steepest weekly slide in the yen since October has been paused. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.